So we have to test. The difference between the three ways of drawing down the divine light from above the world into the world, whether we bring from arich, atik, or pnimius atik, is also seen. The difference between these three is also seen in the way they purify and affect this world. That there's three ways of purifying the world. There's through drawing down arich, which is the outer level of keser. There's drawing down atik, the inner level of keser, and then there's drawing pnimius atik, the inner level of that inner level of keser. And the difference will be seen in the way it purifies the world. The way the world is purified through bringing arich into the world is milamayla lamata, is in a way from above to below. What does that mean, from above to below? When arich is drawn down, it's milamayla lamata, meaning that the purification of the lowly world is not through its own existence, but on the contrary, because there's shining on it a light that is so beyond it, the light of Sovev, that it loses its existence. Right? Like we said last time about three different ways you can inspire another person. One way is to shed an awesome light on them. To just, when you shower them with holiness, they get completely absorbed and lost in the moment. Right? Like, let's say you're trying to influence somebody in their Yiddishkeit. So you could wow them with holiness, just completely overwhelm them with holiness, and that could inspire that person. But how are they inspired? Not they themselves are inspired. You have flooded them with light. So it's not their existence hasn't moved, hasn't changed. Your existence, your light, your enthusiasm and inspiration has overcome them. That's what arich is. Drawing arich into the world is drawing a light that is so high that it floods the world with light, but the world itself hasn't really changed. It loses its existence, it doesn't lift its existence. Fifth line, so therefore even after such an elevation, the fact that the lowly world doesn't oppose that revelation is because it's lost its existence, because the light has overwhelmed it. But there's no change being actually affected in the lowly world itself. Right? So when you overwhelm somebody with light, they don't oppose it, they're overwhelmed, they're taken by it, but they haven't changed. Nothing in them has actually changed. However, when you elevate the world through drawing down atik, the world itself, the lowly world itself, is participating in that. Because like we said earlier in the Maimer, that tainug, which is pleasure, which is what atik represents, pleasure is the inner force and the life force behind all of Ishtalshlus, the entire system of creation. So the elevation of the world through atik is in such a way that the lowly world itself has changed. So rather than convincing somebody or overwhelming them with holiness, when you inspire them to do it, then when it's their pleasure, when it's what they want, so then they have changed. Not just you have changed them, but they have changed themselves. Now, earlier in the Maimer, we used an illustration for this. Where have we seen in history a birur of arich, and where have we seen a birur of atik? This was the difference between the effect that the Mishkan had on the world, as opposed to what the temple, the Beis Hamikdash of Shlomo, had on the world. How so?
Similar to the last Shabbos.
That's right. The Mishkan, what was the Mishkan? The Mishkan was a revelation of divine light, and it traveled through the desert. And wherever when the Yidden stopped on their journeys and they constructed the Mishkan, that became a holy space. That was a holy place where they brought karbonos, the divine presence rested there. It was a holy place. Even though, where was this Mishkan? In the middle of the desert. And what is the desert? The desert is a place of scorpions and snakes. It's not a holy place. But the Mishkan made that place holy by camping there. When the Mishkan then moved, the place where the Mishkan was it holy anymore? Not at all. It was back to being desert. So what does that mean? That the Mishkan was a revelation of holiness, so powerful that it could make desert holy, but it didn't actually make the desert holy. It superimposed holiness on the desert. And as soon as the Mishkan moved, the holiness moved with it. The desert was unchanged. That's like that's biru from arich, where the level of arich is drawn down, so you can override the world, you can overwhelm the world, but you don't change the world that way. On the other hand, the Beis HaMikdash, when the Beis HaMikdash was built by Shlomo Melech, so the Beis HaMikdash stood in one place, it didn't travel, and it drew to it holiness. We know that the Beis HaMikdash was like a major magnet, that people came from all over the world just to see the Beis HaMikdash, and not only that, they nullified themselves to the Yidden at the time and to Shlomo Melech. The classic example of that is Malchus Shva, the Queen of Sheba, who traveled. She heard about Shlomo Melech, and she traveled and bowed down to Shlomo Melech. He was a non-Jewish queen of a nation that could have been an enemy of the Jewish people, and rather than that, they became subjugated to King Solomon. So how was that? That was because the holiness of the Beis HaMikdash was so intense that it drew towards it. It had a magnetic effect that drew towards it, that even those who could have opposed the Jewish people became nullified to the Jewish people as a result. Now there, what happened there? It wasn't the Beis HaMikdash passed over Shva. It was that the holiness of the Beis HaMikdash reached Shva and caused the queen of Shva herself to come of her own accord to nullify herself to Shlomo Melech. That is an example of Atik, of where the reality of the world is actually being changed. It's not. She actually changed. She transformed. She became, from being the queen of Sheba, she became a servant of Shlomo Melech, subjugated to Shlomo Melech. That's when Atik is drawn into the world actually changes itself of its own accord.
Which is higher, isn't it?
Which is higher. Mm-hmm. Just like the difference between Ratzon and Tainuk, that where you do something because you know you have to do it and you really want to do it, even though you have to break yourself to do it. So your faculties obey, but they didn't want to. When you do something because you have pleasure in it, you're inspired to do it, so then you actually do it. You actually changed. So the desert was not inspired to become holy by the Mishkan. The desert was forced to become holy by the Mishkan. Whereas Shva was inspired to connect to Shlomo Melech. Not forced to, but of her own accord. That's Atik. And that's what the Rebbe now explains. On the fifth last line on the page. As explained in the Rebbe Shab's Maimer, the elevation that was caused through the revelation of godliness that Shlomo Melech achieved in the Beis HaMikdash. The revelation that Shlomo Melech achieved was a revelation of Atik. That revelation drew towards it the sparks of holiness. Like a very strong flame, that the sparks of holiness of light are drawn towards it. A big fire draws in and sucks in towards it. So too, the big holiness, the major holiness that was revealed in the Beis HaMikdash, a level of Atik, was so holy that it drew towards it sparks. So because the way that the Beis HaMikdash elevated the world was that the sparks, they themselves, the world itself, was drawn to it of its own accord, of its own choice. So obviously, the lowly world itself is being impacted and affected by the Beis HaMikdash, as opposed to the Mishkan. The Mishkan did not affect the desert once the Mishkan was gone. It It just superimposed holiness on the desert. Whereas the Beis HaMikdash caused the world to be different to the point where the world itself was attracted to holiness. So that's the difference between the impact Arich has on the world and Atik has on the world. But nevertheless, we said there's a third and higher level, Pnimius Atik. So if Arich superimposes holiness on the world but leaves the world unchanged, Atik reveals such a light in the world that the world itself is attracted to Atik, and it is impacted and changed. So what's even higher than that? What's missing in that could be even higher? So the bottom line, Elishim Mikol Mokum, however, because Atik, on the level of Atik, there is still an existence of Ishtalshalos. Ishtalshalos still does exist. Atik is beyond Ishtalshalos, but to be beyond something, the something has to exist. So Atik is a level of godly light next to which Ishtalshalos exists. It's infinitely lower, but it still exists. Umitzad Seder Ishtalshalos. And so according to the laws of Ishtalshalos, Geder Atachten Hu Shu Tachten Hepech Elyon. The whole definition of a lowly world is that it is lowly, that it's the opposite of holiness, of highness. So therefore, any revelation of light from above that is drawn down into the world below, and any effect and impact that the revelation has on the world, will still be somewhat of an additional thing to its identity. Again, even though Atik, when there's a revelation of Atik, the world itself is inspired to connect to godliness, as opposed to Arich, where the world is left as it is. It's just so overwhelmed with light that it can't say no. But nevertheless, the very fact that we're still talking about higher and lower, the godly light and the lowly world, means that the lowly world, in and of itself, its identity is lowliness. It's just that when such a great holiness is revealed, the lowly world becomes inspired to connect to holiness. But it's still a lowly world, and the holiness is still something that's additional to its identity. It's not its very identity. But the impact that is had when there's a revelation of Pnimius Atik, because Pnimius Atik is the infinite light of Hashem, the essence of Hashem. And when you're talking about the essence of Hashem, nothing is outside of it. There's no other existence. On the contrary, in fact, the real existence of Hashem is the truth of all existence, meaning the reality of all existence is godliness. Therefore, when there's a revelation of Pnimius Atik, every being, every entity feels that its real identity is godliness. It is godliness.
How does it achieve that?
So what does that mean? What does that mean? That whether you're talking about Arich or Atik, you're talking about there's a relation between two things. There's a relation between the world and godliness, between higher and lower. When Arich is revealed, what happens? The higher overwhelms the lower. Godliness overwhelms the world. When Atik is revealed, what happens? The higher inspires the lower. The lower is inspired to reach up to the higher. Okay, so one is milamayla lamata, from above to below. There's a superimposition of godly light. The other one is milamata lamayla, from below. The world itself is inspired to reach up to godliness. But either way, there's higher and lower. Pnimius Atik is the level where we're not talking about a divine light. We're not talking about divine energy, an emanation of godliness. We're talking about Hashem's essence. Where Hashem's essence is revealed, there is nothing else. Nothing's outside of Hashem. And when nothing's outside of Hashem, so it's not two things joining together. It's not the high God joining with the lowly world. the world itself, its true identity is godliness. When the world recognizes and feels that its true identity is godliness, so then it's not the world having to connect to Hashem, it's the world being itself. If you be yourself, you are godly. Godliness is everything. And so therefore, it's not something in addition to you. You're not being inspired by something outside of you. It's your very self. You're being true to your real identity, which is godliness. That's what a revelation of Pnimius Atik means. When the true divine nature of creation is revealed. So the example of Arich, how is it? The example of Arich was Vayhi ben Soya Oren. That when the Mishkan traveled, the Oren traveled through the desert, V'yafutzu Mesanecha Mipanecha. So all enemies disappeared. What enemies mean? It means that the powers of Klippa, of evil, completely disappeared from the desert. That's Vayhi ben Soya Oren, when the Oren was traveling through the desert. There are enemies. There is an opposition to godliness, but v'yafutzu, they were spread out. They were banished. They couldn't stay. That was the Mishkan. The Beis HaMikdash of Shlomo Melech was where the enemy, the Queen of Sheba, didn't have to be overwhelmed. She came. She of her own accord came to nullify herself. She was inspired to come towards holiness. That's the Beis HaMikdash. But still, she's still the Queen of Sheba. She's still a separate entity, and she's being inspired to come to Yerushalayim. So that's Atik. What's Pnimius Atik? So it can only be lost in love when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, there'll be a revelation of Pnimius Atik, which is where it's not that there'll be two separate things that the world will recognize Hashem. It's that the world itself will realize its divine nature. And therefore, there won't be any tension in the first place. There'll be complete bittul, as the Maimon will explain. So now in Yud, the Rebbe shows how the difference between what happened in the Beis HaMikdash and what will happen in the future. In Yud, V'zeu shebemei Shlomo nizbaru rab netzutzos elu shehayu behem eize inyan shel ur. In the times of Shlomo Melech, which sparks of holiness were drawn to him? Only those sparks that had somewhat of a sense of light, meaning they were prone to be elevated. Not the entire world became batul to Shlomo. Only those sparks who had a bit of a sensitivity to holiness. So the fact that Malka Shva, this Queen of Sheba, came to nullify herself to Shlomo Melech was because she had a little bit of a spiritual sense. And so therefore, if you've got a bit of a sense, when the light of Shlomo Melech and the Beis HaMikdash shone, so those who had a bit of a taste for such a thing were attracted. But Allah said, but in the future, all sparks will be attracted to holiness. Not just those who have a sense of it, but even those who wouldn't have a sense. Because the elevation that is achieved of the sparks of holiness through a revelation of the outer level of Atik, Chitzonius Atik. The revelation of Shlomo Melech's time was Chitzonius Atik. It's not that the sparks themselves are moving. It's the revelation of Shlomo Melech that inspires the sparks to come to him. So therefore, which sparks were attracted to Shlomo? Only those who had a sense of holiness, were somewhat prone to be affected by holiness. They came to him. But the revelation of Pnimis Atik is that when Pnimis Atik is revealed, it reveals that the thing itself is godliness. It's got its own godly light. Not that it's attracted to godliness, it has godliness itself. So therefore, in the future, when Mashiach comes, there'll be a revelation of Pnimius Atik. Even sparks of holiness that have become darkened, buried, and disconnected, they will be elevated and included in holiness. So, in other words, Just like we said before about the three types of tzaddikim. There's a tzaddik that inspires through flooding with light, where you can't help but being affected, but you don't really change. Then there's a tzaddik who inspires, who teaches and inspires. And then there's a tzaddik who just with his presence awakens in the other person their inner holiness. The difference between those second two, the tzaddik who inspires and educates and teaches, or a tzaddik who somehow awakens your inner holiness, what's the difference? A tzaddik who's teaching and inspiring, who is going to be inspired by that tzaddik? Who is going to change their life based on the teachings of that tzaddik?
The person. The person, huh?
Yeah, but which people? Who is going to be inspired? Everyone? Will everyone be inspired? No.
Only one.
Not everyone will be inspired. Who will be inspired? People who are looking for it, who have it in them, just it hasn't been ignited yet. They'll be inspired by that tzaddik.
Like Shiva?
Yeah. That to be inspired, you have to be open to inspiration. Not everyone's open to it. So you can have the most inspiring teacher giving the most amazing lessons, but if people are not interested or closed or not open to such a thing, it won't have any effect. Only those who have somewhat of a sense of these things will be inspired. Whereas, when there's a tzaddik who's revealing the inner godliness that is present in every soul, so then there's no exception to that. Not everyone is looking to be inspired, and not everyone is open to spirituality, but everyone has a divine soul. And so if that's what you're connecting with, so then there's nobody who will not be inspired by such a thing, will not be turned on. If you're talking about the divine reality within every soul. So inspiration, not everyone's ready for. But godliness, everyone has. And so when you're inspiring people to come back to holiness, some are open to it, some are not. But when you're connecting to the godliness within every person, everyone's got that. And nobody will not be inspired. So therefore, in the time of Shlomo Melech, where the holiness emanated, it caused an inspiration. But who was inspired? Those beings, those people who had an openness to it. Whereas last love, when Mashiach comes, the divine reality within creation will be revealed, and every spark, even those sparks who are totally uninspired and uninterested, they will also be turned on. Because there's nothing that's outside of godliness. Not only that, second last on that paragraph, second last line. Even the physical reality, not just the sparks of holiness in the world, but even the physical world itself, will be completely united with godliness. As explained in a previous Maimon, the Rabbi said in that year. So the physical world itself, not just the sparks of holiness within the world, which is the potential for godliness, but even the physical world itself, which in and of itself has no potential for godliness, even that will be connected to godliness and holiness when Mashiach comes. So that's the difference between the times of Shlomo and Mashiach times, between Atik and Pnimis Atik. But there's a further difference. Another difference between another difference between the elevation of the world that happened in the times of Shlomo Melech in the first temple and the elevation of the world that will be when Mashiach comes. In those times, the time of Shlomo Melech, how did the nations become elevated? Through coming to him. Malka Shva, the queen of Sheba, she heard about Shlomo Melech, was inspired to connect to his holiness. And so she traveled from Shva, from her homeland, to Eretz Yisrael. Shva is somewhere in Africa, and she came to Israel to connect to Shlomo Melech. Aval kodem shebo elav lo nisbar adayin. Before she came to him, she was not elevated. She had to come to him, otherwise she would have stayed home. She had to come to him to become connected. So she needed to leave her place and come to his place.
You can say the same with Yitro. He had to leave.
Yeah, he had to come to join the people. So even though she, in her homeland, in Shva, was where she heard about Shlomo Melech, and she was affected by that and inspired to connect to him, that's how far his reach was. But she couldn't stay there. She had to come to Shlomo Melech to be connected. Even though the revelation that Shlomo Melech affected shone all the way to the sparks where they were far away, and they were inspired there. They were inspired at home to come to him. However, their actual elevation and connection could only happen when they came to him. So his light shone that far, but it didn't affect them enough that they could stay home. They had to come to him to be connected. We see that even after the Queen of Sheba heard about Shlomo and was inspired by Shlomo, she had to come to Yerushalayim. And only then did she become elevated. What do you see from here? The elevation of Queen of Sheba, as an example, was not that she herself found her inner godliness. It's rather that the revelation of Shlomo was so intense that it affected her. So therefore she had to come to Shlomo Melech in order to be elevated. Because it wasn't her innate godliness that was revealed, it was her connection to Shlomo, to the godliness of Shlomo, that was revealed. So she had to come to him to be elevated. But in the future, when Mashiach comes, because in the future, the way the world will be elevated is by a revelation of the truth, the true identity of the world, that the world itself is godly. Then it says in the prophets that what will happen is Hashem will transform all the nations as they are in their homeland to serve Hashem as one. They don't have to come anywhere, they don't have to leave, they don't have to go anywhere. As they are in their place, their holiness will be revealed. The holiness of the entire world will be revealed.
So if the Queen of Sheba would have been in time of Mashiach, she didn't need to go to Shlomo Mashiach.
That's right. She can stay where she is. Yeah. That's maybe what it means that Eretz Yisrael will spread throughout the entire world when Mashiach comes. What does it mean? It means you won't have to go to Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael will come to you, because the revelation of godliness will show that the entire world is Eretz Yisrael.
I think in one of the prophecies of Yechezkel, all the nations of the world have to come to Yerushalayim once a year or something, otherwise they won't get rained. Otherwise they won't get rain in their country.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But they'll be serving Hashem in their home. They'll still Yerushalayim will still be Yerushalayim. But unlike Malchus Shva, who in order to connect had to come to Yerushalayim, the nations, when Mashiach comes, will be able to be where they are and connect to Hashem, because the inner godliness will be revealed in every place. So that's the difference between Gilui of Chetzonius Atik, a revelation of the outer level of Atik, which happened by Shlomo Melech in the Beis HaMikdash, or a Gilui Pnimius Atik, the revelation of the inner level of Atik, which will happen Lasid Love when Mashiach comes. Now we know that even though such a thing, such a revelation is yet to come, we haven't got there yet, but a foretaste of Mashiach we do have. That in our times, as we are in the times of Mashiach, so a foretaste of Mashiach we already have, and that is through Chassidus. And that's what the next section, Yud Aleph, explains. A similar concept of this revelation of Pnimis Atik is found in the idea of spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus outwards, which is the preparation and the vessel to bring Mashiach. as we know from the famous letter that the Baal Shem Tov wrote to his brother-in-law about an out-of-body experience that he had on Rosh Hashanah one year, where he came to the hall of Mashiach in heaven, and he met Mashiach and said, Mosai Kasimar, when are you coming? And the answer was, when your wellsprings spread to the most outlying place, that is when I'm coming. So what does that mean? The Torah Chassidus is Pnimis Atik, because what Chassidus is a revelation of Pnimis Atik. What the Baal Shem Tov came into the world to teach, to reveal, was Pnimis Atik, which means that he was here to reveal the godliness within everything, which is indeed, that was what the Baal Shem Tov's basic message was, that every Yid, no matter how low, is godly and has a godly soul, that everything that happens is Ashkacha Pratis, because godliness is in everything, that Eino Milvado, that there's nothing but Hashem. That this is what Chassidus came to reveal, that the godly reality within the world. So it's not coming to tell you something about Hashem, it's tell you something about the world, that the world is godly. That's what Chassidus is, a revelation of Pnimis Atik. So that's why, through learning the teachings of Chassidus, and through keeping the customs of Chassidus, what happens is that the natural faculties of the person who learns Chassidus start to become divine faculties. In other words, Chassidus changes your perspective of yourself, that what you saw as being just a natural physical being, you saw yourself as being a part of the physical world, but Chassidus reveals your divine power, and by learning it and becoming aware of that, it brings it to the fore. It brings out your divine power. And so your natural faculties, your nature and your personality starts to become divine. Because Chassidus is a revelation of Pnimis Atik, of the divine reality within creation. Because the more you draw down a revelation of Pnimis Atik, you start to feel, at least subconsciously, you start to feel that your true existence is the existence of Hashem. Right? So what's the Rabbi saying? That learning Chassidus, what does learning Chassidus mean? It means revealing Pnimis Atik. When you study and learn and try to understand a point in Chassidus, there's a message of Pnimis Atik, the divine reality of everything, that you're revealing it. You're bringing it down by understanding it and learning it and discussing it. You're bringing that reality to the fore, to the surface. And that cannot help but affect you. You'll be affected by that understanding of the world as being godly, that you will start to sense, at least subconsciously, even if you don't feel it in a literal way, but you'll sense at least subconsciously, my real existence is godliness. It's not me, it's godly. It's a lakus. That's a complete transformation of your personality. So the idea of spreading the wellsprings of the Baal Shem Tov, the wellsprings of Chassidus, to the outside, what does that mean? That even in that which is called outside, there should be in that outside not just the wellsprings of the water that come from the spring, not just like fresh water coming from a spring. That's what happened when Shlomo Melech was around. There was a revelation in Yerushalayim, but it flowed to the outside, even to Shva. No, with Chassidus the idea is that the wellsprings themselves should reach the outside. Not the water from the wellspring, but the wellspring itself. So in Shlomo Melech's time, there was a revelation in Yerushalayim, but the revelation reverberated beyond Yerushalayim. But the idea of spreading the wellsprings outside means taking the wellspring itself, and it itself should go to the outside, revealing the godliness in every place. And what that reveals is the real identity of the chutzah, the outside. What's the real identity of the outside? It's really godly as well. It is really a wellspring. There's a wellspring there as well. So with this we can understand a phrase that was used by the Rebbe Rashab, a saying that he said when he was describing the revelation of Chassidus through the Alter Rebbe after his incarceration in Peterburg, after Yud Tes Kislev. Remember the Alter Rebbe started his career teaching Chassidus. He was incarcerated for that and freed. And after he was freed, he not only continued, he actually increased in his revelation of Chassidus. And he understood, the Alter Rebbe understood that the reason he was incarcerated was there was a spiritual accusation against him. How can you reveal Pnimius Atik? You're taking the Pnimius Atik, the deepest level, which is reserved for Mashiach, and you're publicizing it. There was a spiritual accusation against him. The fact he was freed was that he won the spiritual court case, so therefore he not only continued doing it, but he increased, he started revealing even more. So if you look at the teachings of the Alter Rebbe from before his incarceration, they were briefer and more cryptic. After he came free, he spoke longer, explained things even better, made it even clearer, he brought it down even more. So the Rebbe Rashab compared it, he said, Shual derech hazayis, it's like an olive. When you crush an olive, the oil comes out. So they crushed the Alter Rebbe, they put him into jail, and what happened? He revealed even more oil, even more Chassidus. That was how the Rebbe Rashab described it. Now, why specifically did he use the metaphor of oil? He could have said that when you crush an apple, you get more juice. Well, why oil from an olive?
It's Chanukah.
Because the idea of oil is oil's nature is that it is separate and distinct from all other things. It doesn't mix in other liquids. It always stays distinct. But at the same time, it also spreads throughout everything. It gets onto everything. Oil stays distinct, but it gets everywhere. Meaning the oil itself spreads onto everything. But it doesn't just affect everything, it actually itself spreads. It has a nature of getting into everything. So on the one hand, it stays distinct, oil never mixes, but at the same time, it gets everywhere. And that's exactly the revelation of Yud Tes Kislev. The fact that the real spreading of the wellsprings to the outside happened after Yud Tes Kislev was because that was when Pnimis Atik started to be revealed. The Pnimis Atik who moved the Mekol Ishtalshlus. What is Pnimis Atik? It is completely beyond all of Ishtalshlus. It's certainly beyond the outside, what we call the Chutzah, the lowly world. Pnimis Atik is the highest level. It's not just Keser, it's Pnimis Keser. Not just Pnimis Keser, but it's the Pnimis of Pnimis Keser. It's the highest level that is completely beyond. It's totally separate and distinct. It's certainly much higher than Chitzonius Atik, just like oil does not mix with anything, so to Pnimis Atik is the level that's completely beyond any definition. But nevertheless, for the very same reason, because it's so high, it's the essence of everything. So therefore, after Yud Tes Kislev, that's when things started to spread. The mayonas, this wellsprings of Chassidus started to spread everywhere. That the wellsprings themselves are now found in the outside. Just like oil, that the nature of oil is it spreads into everything. So again, why did the Rebbe Rashab use the metaphor of oil to describe the Alter Rebbe's revelation after Yud Tes Kislev? That when you squash the olive, the oil comes out. Why oil? Because oil is distinct from everything, but gets into everything. So too, the revelation of Chassidus after Yud Tes Kislev, Pnimis Atik, is the level, Pnimis Atik is that level that's beyond everything. It floats above, it's completely beyond. But it's so high that it is found within everything. So while Arich is beyond, but it's connected. Atik is beyond and completely beyond. Pnimis Atik is so high, it's the essence of Hashem, which is found in everything. So it's higher than everything, but it's within everything. And that is the revelation of the Mayonas, the well springs of Chassidus, which is Pnimis Atik, but Chutzah, in the Chutzah itself, that it spreads all the way. Okay.